What a win. Top 4 on the line and another one against the little brother. We won by 20, it could have been 40, and it should have been a Franklin kicked more. 1 week, 1 win, top 4. That's the equation, 1 week at a time. You are listening to the Swans Blog's SwansCast, the #1 Sydney Swans fans podcast. In this week's episode, we review the Swans' come-from-behind win against the Giants. We talk about Lance Franklin's amazing 5 goals, Kieren Jacks' return to form, how good is that? We give you our Sunday champions and villains, discuss a selection of players, and review the Swans' terrific win. I'm Justin Mitchell, and with me is SwansCast regulars Joshua Marr and Stephen Park. Josh, over to you first. Pretty good win.
It was a great win. I got a little bit nervous during the third quarter. I thought, we're going to finish with 10-16 and lose by 5 points, but they got it on line. Pretty comfortable win in the end. Could have been bigger.
Yep.
With the exception of some pretty shoddy, ball movement by foot in the first half. I thought we were pretty good. It's probably the first game this year where our tackling on the ball carrier was up there for the whole match, and I was really chuffed to see it.
Yeah, and Stephen?
Well, Justin, I thought our intensity was outstanding. You couldn't have asked for anything better. I do believe some of our kicking, just as Josh said, especially in the first half, was a bit poor. But overall, a great win, even though we were playing against a weakened GWS side.
Yes, they did have a couple of injuries during the game as well. They actually had 4 injuries during the game. Phil Davis did his back. He copped a really nasty cork early in the game, but he played out the game. Then there was Jeremy Finlayson, who did his ankle. I think he just rolled his ankle. He managed to play out the game. Jeremy Cameron rolled his ankle in the warm-up. And Lloyd, or I can't remember his first name, but Lloyd, he copped a really nasty cut to the cheek, I think in the last quarter or the third quarter, but he did play out the game there as well. So they were a bit walking wounded, as the commentators love to say. But it isn't like the Swans haven't had their own injury problems. Earlier this year, we were pretty much cruel by injury, and especially last week when we had 2 of our defenders, basically our best small defender, go off the ground before quarter time and didn't see him back. So yeah, do you guys think that the injury list at GWS is right up there amongst the worst, or do you think it's a little bit of a crutch at the moment for people to lean on?
Look at their injury list, though. So some of the people on that injury list are permanently on that injury list. So I think Deledio is Italian for strained calf muscle, pretty much indefinitely now. So they say, Brett Deledio's out of the GWS team because of this calf muscle, and you sort of go,
I did forget to add Ryan Griffin as well, who did his hamstring in the third quarter, but he's also been a permanent fixture of that injury list as well.
Look, Ryan Griffin is probably English for strained hamstring. So they've got some regulars on that list at the moment, and I think people sort of forget that. It's like seeing Reid on our injury list and going, Sam Reid's out again, and most of us
Gary
go,
Rowan, yeah.
Or Gary Rowan. So I don't know. I think probably the one on their injury list that they really could have used was Kelly.
Or Shaw, definitely Shaw as well.
Or Shaw, but that might have actually worked in our favour because they would have been a little bit more conventional as well.
Yeah, true. And Stephen?
I actually think that the Giants, like many other teams, are actually cruelled by injury. If you actually look at it, and I know Justin and Josh, you've just said that, yes, they've got a couple of people who are permanently injured, but a lot of those permanently injured players, if they were fit, would be walk-up starts in any club in the league. Pattinson, Deledio. You look at some of those names, if you actually looked at their injury list, they're 26 players at the moment, or no, 21 players at the moment that are injured. 17 of those would be a walk-up start in most AFL teams.
Yeah.
They do have a massively good list, and a massive amount of injuries to a massively good amount of players.
On that, they had only 4 AFL players in the NEFL game, in the curtain raiser. So they really do have a pretty big injury list at the moment. I mean, the Swans about 4 to 5 weeks ago had one almost just as big as well. We had nearly half the squad injured. The NEFL team, I remember, had about 8 players in it from the seniors. Actually, I think they had 2 players, and they had about 8 all up, including the normal reserve players. So yeah, the Giants are definitely in a bit of strife at the moment.
Yeah, they can absorb it. Well, they probably absorb it better than a lot of teams. The depth in their reserves team is quite extraordinary when all their senior players are fit. So they've been able to tolerate that a lot better than most of the rest of us. I would say that one of the, and we'll probably talk about it later, I guess, but one of the big things that happened after half-time is that Luke Parker went head-to-head with Dylan Shield, and Shield was almost a non-factor in the game by three-quarter time. And I thought that was one of the bigger turning points in the game, not necessarily the Davis injury.
Yeah, and Stephen?
I agree with what you just said then, Josh. I do believe that was the big turning point, but I actually think it's actually half the AFL's fault that this is starting to occur. I believe that the games are now way too fast and that all the injuries are coming from the amount of pressure that is put on players. Basically, these players start in November and finish in September. So they're playing and training year-round. The body is not designed to do this. Even elite boxers, they start training about 8 weeks before a match. Then they have 2 or 3 months off. It's just ridiculous that these human bodies are expected to stand up and actually do this. And this is why the Magpies, the Giants, the Swans, who else is there? Carlton, have all had massive runs of injuries.
I mean, you look at West Coast as well, you could kind of rule a line through some of those players. Kennedy has been almost non-factor the entire season. Actually, like the last 2 or 3 years, he's been almost permanently injured. Jack Darling's also spent a bit of time off. They haven't missed a lot of players, but when those players have been missing from their team, they have been missing for quite a long time. There's also something on the injury front, and we'll move on from this in a moment, but if you go back about 15 years, a lot of soft tissue injuries happened mostly from collision. They weren't soft tissue injuries from running and the amount of running that players had to do. When you're looking at like Nathan Buckley and Robert Harvey and Boomer Harvey, they were basically your elite runners, and they were running what I guess you would consider pretty average numbers these days. But 15, 20 years ago, players probably ran about 15% less, 15, 20% less. They potentially trained up to that much less as well.
Yeah,
that's exactly
I think
right.
The medical coverage wasn't as great then either, so I clearly remember a former player saying that, back in the day that a hamstring injury was just considered a 3-week injury regardless of the severity, so they probably played through a lot more than what they do now. But I agree that the soft tissue strains from overworking probably out of control at the moment. I bet you 20 years ago nobody would have known what osteitis pubis was. No one would have had it. No one would have overworked their pelvic girdle. So,
or they would have played through
it.
To do
something.
Yeah, I actually had it when I was a kid, and I still played football with it. I can only play about 3/4 of football. I'd always, every single game, I'd miss the first quarter, and I'd play the last 3/4, and then I wouldn't train at all until about the last 10 minutes on the Thursday session, and that was about it.
Did it affect your kicking?
Oh yeah, it affected everything. But by the end of the game, like between I guess halfway through the third and halfway through the fourth, when you ride up your height and your warm and all that sort of stuff, everything's normal. But after that, it starts seizing up, and you can't really run, you can't move, you can't kick, you can't really do much with your legs. But yeah, look, the injuries are definitely is more medical coverage, but I think there's definitely more soft tissue injuries, guys.
Yep.
I agree, Justin, and I'd actually say if you actually look at it, it's all got to do with the way we play games now. Because you've got all these players. Midfielders used to say do your 10 to 12 kilometres back 15, 20 years ago. Now, that's your average player is doing that 10 to 12 kilometres. Your elite runners are doing your 15 to 20. And you've got people going backwards and forwards, and that's why there's so much congestion, because everyone runs so much more. Therefore, there are so many more chances for injuries.
Yeah, look, I saw that on the AFL app. I'm just having a quick look now just to do this, and we'll move on from this in a moment. But I'm having a look at the tracker, and we look at the total distance covered. Lockie Whitfield, 15.6. Tim Taranto, 15.1. Harry Cunningham, 14.6. I'm not quite sure which Keefe it is. Is it Lockie Keefe, I think? Yeah, Lachlan Keefe.
Yep.
He covered 14.4, and Callum Sinclair covered 14.1. Right. That is absolutely insane. And those are just average numbers. They're putting in them every single week. I remember about 8 years ago when I was doing umpiring, if you were running 14 kilometres a game as a field umpire, you were considered to doing like a lot of work. And these days, footballers are doing that. And there's some footballers doing 12, 13 kilometres within the first three quarters. So it's pretty insane how much they have to move. But look, we'll move on. Top of the agenda was not the injury discussion, believe it or not. It's actually 1 month ago, Swans were written off by all and sundry. We'd sunk to our lowest position on the ladder for quite some time after a pretty dreadful loss to Essendon, and then we've somehow turned 4th from 10th back into an opportunity to become 4th at the end of the season. We were actually 4th after we beat GWS, so quite the turnaround, guys. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
You first, Steve. I'm just going to quickly look something up.
All right, not a problem at all. So, Justin, really, really good. I actually will freely admit that I was one of the people who wrote the Swans off here 7-8 weeks ago. I actually thought coming out after the bye, we had injuries to Grundy that we thought was an injury, and then it came out that it was mental health issues. We didn't seem to be getting some of our good players back. Jack was struggling, Hanbury was struggling, and then both got injured. Our young guys started to drop off a fair bit and have seemed to pick up. Jones was getting himself into a bit of strife on the field.
Yep.
We were starting to look like... yeah, got himself suspended. We were starting to look like we were in a bit of a struggle. But we've turned it around, and I think we've turned it around on the back of our intensity and on the back of our will to win. I think the biggest turnaround has been that our established stars are starting to show what they can do again. And they're not performing to their great standards, but they're just in there, they're under it, and they're actually willing it on.
Yeah, look, Parker's game was probably the best I've seen him play for quite some time. Definitely his best of the season, and you might even go back and say probably his best of the last 2 years or close enough to it. Certainly back when he was in Brownlow contention in that grand final year, back in 2016 when he came runners-up or close enough to runners-up in the Brownlow, and he's actually leading with 18 votes, I think, after the first 9 rounds or something like that, something insane. Then you look at Kieren Jacks. His return to form was about as welcome as it gets. But also we discussed 2 weeks ago with, might have been Heather or Josh on a podcast, not sure, about the return of Dan Hanbury and how important he was against the Demons. And the fact is just been able to free up everyone else to do what they do best. And Josh, do you like the turnaround?
I love the turnaround. I don't think it's totally unexpected. I think probably what Steve's talking about is I was one of the people who said, and I think I might have said on the podcast here about 3 weeks ago, to be honest, that, you know, the way we were playing, that we were unlikely to win another game for the season. But where that comes from, the metrics we were putting out were shocking, and we actually ranked worse than Carlton in a lot of things. And I'm just looking at a couple of them now. So we were the worst team to concede inside 50s. We were the worst team for allowing the opposition in our back half or in their forward half. We were ranked 14th. Which is right down there with the Suns, I think, at the time for contested possession differentials. Like, we were shocking. We really were playing like a bottom 4 team, and the numbers back that up. And based on that, playing like a bottom 4 team, you couldn't say that we were like, you know, we were going to win another game that season without draw based off those numbers. But gee whiz, the turnaround's been something phenomenal, and I'd love to see what those numbers look like now, where we rank against the rest of the competition, and I can't wait to give the Hawks a hiding this weekend coming. Yeah,
it really is amazing, and I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to say I also wrote the Swans off. I'm pretty sure I put it on Twitter, Facebook, and certainly said it in one of the podcasts where I thought maybe the Swans really should consider putting the Q in the rack and looking forward to next year, because we do have some really good draft prospects. We've got Cole Dunkley, who's a father-son. So he's a bit like Josh Dunkley, an inside mid, but slightly smaller. So he might be more of the Swans kind of player. And we also have the big one coming in as well, who has already committed, and that is Nick Blakey. So, and
Buddy
there
2.0.
is some...
Buddy Franklin 2.0.
Yeah, I know. 2.0. Could be more like Sam Reid. He's like a big, tall player, 196, who can play midfield and forward.
Not with the
so think of like an even...
No, don't do that.
No. No, he's like a taller sort of Jordan Dawson. The thing is, there has been talk in the AFL, certainly if you listen to Triple M, that Carlton and Gold Coast may be given priority picks, and the AFL is actually looking to front-end it. So Carlton could end up with pick 1 and 2. And then Gold Coast would end up with pick 3 and 4, but because they're looking to get a first-round compensation pick for Tom Lynch, they could also end up with pick 5.
Oh.
So this is it's a bit of a discussion at the moment. There's murmurings, and that there aren't a lot of people who will be happy with that, because that is going to completely and utterly screw up the draft, and they're just going to bid.
Can I just
point
something out here? If they get pick 5 for Tom Lynch, considering what Hawthorn got for Franklin, that is an absolute joke.
Oh, 100% agreed.
An absolute joke. That would entirely, it would be like the Gary Ablett trade back to Geelong, I guess, that it would be entirely about propping up a club and not actually doing something that's fair. So Franklin should have been the benchmark. So if they get 5 for him, and what Hawthorn got 20-something for Franklin, that would just be a travesty.
But Josh,
well, the fact that Hawthorn only got 20 is a travesty to begin with. But yeah, go ahead, Steve.
well, you've got to look at it this way. When has the AFL done anything that is ever fair? You look at what they did to the Swans.
Okay, maybe we need to change this conversation, because we're going to be here for the next hour.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But anyway, I want to get back to why I think the Swans have turned it around. So
Yep,
let me get
please
back
do.
to I want to give you this. This is what wasn't happening in those 4 or 5 games that we played really poorly. And I'm telling you this, contested possessions and pressure acts, so their intensity. Isaac Heaney on the weekend, 27 pressure acts. Luke Parker, 24. Kennedy, 16. Robinson, 16. Ronk, 16. Cunningham, 15. Rampy, 15. Contested possessions. Parker, 15. Franklin, 14. Kennedy, 14. Jack. Yes, Kieren Jacks is actually back into some sort of form. 12. Isaac Heaney, 10. George Hewitt, 9. Now, that's what's actually turned our game. That's what we based our entire careers on, is that. And we've started to look like we did before.
The amazing thing about Heaney's game was he only had 13 possessions, but 10 of those were contested, and he had 10 tackles, and he had 3 clearances. It was literally about the best ever 13 possession game you could possibly ever have, short of going Ben Ronk level of kicking 7 goals. He was in a forward line, he was in midfield, and he was in defence. He even spoiled Tomlinson, who was on a long lead of about 40 metres just outside the forward 50. And that was when the game was on the line. There was about 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and we were only up by 2 points at that point.
Yep, agree. And even our tackle count, like we've got 68 for this week. We had weeks where we didn't even crack 30. And whatever our tackle count was, you could double that and add another 10%, and you'd come up with our number of turnovers. So our pressure's way up again. Back to, Swans football. That's where it is. Everything we've ever done has been built around that, and we're back, baby.
Yeah, we are. Now, look, we do have it's time for our champions and villains. Now, the amazing thing is that for our champions, only one of us has actually gone for a Swans player. And Stephen, I'm going to hand it over to you. You are the only one with a Swans player who is your Sunday champion. Please tell us why.
Well, I've actually chosen this man for one simple reason. He's selfless. All he cares about is the club and his teammates. The man that I have actually chosen as my champion is Alex Johnson. And the reason I've chosen him is because he did his knee last week. He could have went into sulking and totally stepped away from the club while he decided what he was going to do. Yet, he was there at the game. He was down in the rooms before the game went and started. He was in there at half-time, and he was in there having a laugh and a joke with the players after the game. This is a true inspiration and someone that we should look up to. This guy could have stepped away and went, that's it, I've had it, and just totally went into his shell, went into depression or whatever. But no, he's there for his teammates and he's there for his club. A true man.
Yep.
Great.
Love it. That's a great one.
Great pickup, Steve. Love it.
Now, Josh, your one is from the north of Sydney, so let's hear your champion.
Oh, I feel a little bit inadequate following up with an Alex Johnson. So Chris Fagan, the coach of the Brisbane Lions, has done some great things the last couple of weeks, which has really made me prick my ears up and pay attention to him. He seems to be a great coach, and he understands the demographic of his players, and and the sort of psychological level he's trying to pitch his message at. And something that Lepich and Voss and Guy McKenna and Rocket Eade probably should have paid attention to with their group of kids as well. But he's done two things which were great, and one was when Cam Rayner missed that goal with a minute to go a couple of weeks ago, by trying to kick around the corner instead of just doing a drop punt. He effectively lost the game for the Lions off his own boot. And instead of getting crabby with him, he sort of took him in his arms and gave him a hug, pretty much out on the field, and basically told him that, don't worry about it, you'll learn from it, it's fine. You're going to win us games off your own boot in the rest of your career. Just, pick yourself up. There's nothing wrong here. You're just fine. And this week, with the lead up to the Q clash, where one of the Lions players came out and said that the Gold Coast Suns aren't hard enough and we're going to flog them. The first thing he opened his post-game press conference with was that we don't stand for that. We were disappointed that it happened, and it doesn't represent the way the Brisbane Lions want to go around things, and that it, basically said it showed a lack of respect for their opposition. I just think he's a classy coach, and the more I hear from Chris Fagan, the more I like him.
You know what I like about
really
that?
like that too.
You know what I like about that, Josh? He's a Tasmanian, mate.
You've all got to stick together, eh?
That's right. I love Chris Fagan.
Oh, he's the best kind of coach they could have got up there in Brisbane. The good thing that's going on at their club at the moment is they aren't a results-oriented club. They know they're in a development phase. They're supporting the development phase. They haven't brought in like a Voss or a Lepich to go, we want you to build the club, but you have absolutely no experience whatsoever. So just go out there and do what you're doing, like a Herd did. Buckley, I think, Collingwood saved his bacon by bringing in the right people around him. And, he's been able to develop, but so many players who became coaches have just failed. I remember back to Mark Harvey and the fellow who was at Richmond before Dimmer. Christ, what was his name? Knight. Good old Knighty. He had a shocking time as well. So, yeah, look, Fagan, I think, has done the right thing, and he's doing really well for Brisbane at the moment.
And it actually says,
now,
before you go on, Justin,
go ahead, Steve.
It actually says something about it, because if you actually look at it, Chris Fagan is a former teacher. He knows how to deal with kids. He knows how to communicate with the younger people. It's the same as Bolton. And he may not have been able to do it as well because his talent's not there, but he's the same style of coach. Yeah,
and there are some question marks over Brendan Bolton's coaching at the moment. And he's a nice guy, Brendan Bolton, that is, and he does his best. And Carlton, their performances are up and down like a yo-yo at the moment. I mean, they had a pretty good effort today, and they only really just fell short against the Dogs, and they could have beaten them. But so many times over the last couple of years, their efforts have been found wanting. Now, I do have a hero, or a Sunday champion, and this one actually happened about maybe 2 minutes before we started recording this podcast, and that is Eddie Betts. Now, he has done nothing all game, he's done nothing all season, with the game on the line and my $1,200 multi up in the air for a good 3 or 4 seconds. He jumps on the back of, I think it was Josh Jenkins, and pulls down a screamer and goes back and slots it through. It was a terrific mark, and given the importance of the game and the fact that North Melbourne kicked 4 in like 4 minutes of just insane football, it was a great mark. So he's my Sunday champion. Now, villains. We're going to kick you off, Josh. I'd like to know your villain, because I think everyone can relate to this one.
If anyone... I'm going to start again. If anyone managed to sit through the Geelong Fremantle game and watch all 4 quarters, you were either drunk or heavily medicated. It was the worst display of football you will ever see past quarter time, where you actually thought, gee, Fremantle are in with a chance here. The weather was terrible. It was bucketing rain. There was hail. And Geelong came out and kicked, I think, 11 unanswered goals. And when I mean unanswered, I mean it was unanswered. Freo didn't even put up a point. But Geelong then went on to put on 23 consecutive goals over the next 3 quarters. And Freo, I think, put on 4 behinds. It was absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, it actually reminded me of like going to one of those like under 14s games, and you've got like a really, really crap team full of like 11 and 12-year-olds, and you've got a team full of like boy kids, and they're just kicking goal after goal after goal, and it's just like, please, someone stop. It's like that Simpsons meme, he's already dead, just stop.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, too, if you want to see a piece of masterful media management by a coach, check out the post-game press conference with Ross Lyon, because he owns a couple of the reporters in that. It was very Bill Belichick-like, if you follow the NRL. He has disdain for AFL media, and it showed.
Well, I think the general rule of thumb is when you're up there asking Ross some questions, don't ask stupid questions because he's going to rip you apart. But
Or
and he did another good one.
Or make sure you know the answer before you actually ask the question yourself.
Oh, yeah, I know, because he's asking, do you know the answer? No. How much is a few? I don't know, 2 or 3. He goes, well, if I'm not qualified to answer that question, then you're probably not qualified to answer the question either, so why asking it?
And Ross Lyon?
It was great.
Yep, and Ross Lyon, it was Hawthorn 2 years, mate. That's who he was talking about.
Now, I have a villain, and we'll do yours last, Stephen, because you're going to have to explain yourself here, and there's no coming back from it either. Now, my one is for the AFL, for their tinkering of the rules again. Now, anyone who's watched any football this weekend will have seen people giving away, or they would have had free kicks paid against them for any kind of assaultment of jumper punches or body hits. I suppose the most galling one was Motlop practically throwing away the game against Collingwood at the MCG on Saturday, when he gave, I can't even remember who it was, number 37 I think it was, a bit of a whack after he'd already whacked him. Then, obviously, Finlayson, I think it was, gave away a 50 when he whacked Luke Parker in the side. And then there was another one earlier in the game when Hanbury gave away, I think it was Hanbury who gave away a 50 for whacking one of the guys in the chest. But the thing is, it's not consistently paid either. There are so many instances where there are punches where right in front of the umpire doesn't do anything. There was a really good example today, actually, between the Demons and the Eagles, where one of the Eagles players really ripped into one of the Demons players and nothing. Just play on.
Yep. Yeah, there was a 50-metre paid against Daisy Thomas for something very similar today.
Yes, exactly.
And that was the start of the run of the Bulldogs. You know, Carlton were never really in it, never really quite out of it, but that was the beginning of the end, that 50-metre, because it resulted in a goal. But they wouldn't have paid that last week. No,
100% not. Now, look, Stephen, your Sunday villain, you got some explaining to do, mate.
Right, okay. Well, Justin, as I said, I did have my Sunday villain as Buddy Franklin, and that was only because if he'd have kicked straight, he would have actually been leading the Coleman medal now. However, I remember I changed it, and I'm actually going to tell you why I changed my Sunday villain. And it's to the...
No, I just wanted you to leave it as Buddy Franklin, but go ahead.
I want this one because I need to. And I'm actually coming out of retirement around this, Justin. I haven't written an article.
What do you mean? You're not even 40 years old.
I know. I'm coming out of retirement. I haven't written an article in the last 12 months for the blog, but I'm actually going to write one just around this, and it's got nothing to do with the Swans. But I'm going to put it on anyway.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to publish it then. You've got to put Swans in it somewhere.
Yep, right. This is my argument. The AFL fixture is crap. It is the worst fixturing
no arguments there.
Of any sport that I have ever watched in my life. The reason I say...
Wait, is this a legitimate villain?
This is the legitimate villain.
Okay.
The reason I say that, if you actually look at the way the roster is actually set up, you have Geelong versus Fremantle. You have a team that is vying for the 8 or in the 8, playing a team that is at the bottom. It shouldn't happen at this stage of the year. You have the Suns versus the Brisbane Lions, 2 lower teams playing against each other. It's 4 points. You have Richmond versus Essendon, 2 teams that are within vicinity of each other. It's 8 points. The Giants versus the Swans, it's 20 points, but you've got the fact that you had the injuries. You've got teams, Western Bulldogs, Carlton, 2 teams within the vicinity of each other, 18 points. Melbourne, West Coast, 2 teams within the vicinity of each other, 17 points. If they actually fixtured the roster in a way that it actually worked out properly, it would actually be worthwhile. And now I've got this whole scheme that I'm not going to go into now that I've actually emailed to the AFL at the beginning of this year, and I've actually resent it back to them again because they need to do something about it. If you actually have teams that are close to each other, playing each other, you won't have blowout games.
Yeah, Oh, look, there has been discussion over the last couple of years about conferences, about a fluid last 6 rounds, that sort of thing, about trying to, get some really good matchups, teams that should be playing against each other, appropriate matchups and things like that. But traditionally, you look at North Melbourne and Geelong, they have quite often had very soft runs into the finals. Last year, Geelong had a pretty soft run in. They had a very soft run in, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, to the point where they were playing only bottom 8 teams for about 7 weeks in a row. So, look, Geelong have always got the rub of the green when it comes to fixtures. They always play their really tough games at home or in Melbourne. They rarely play them outside of Victoria, so it's a bit disappointing. They basically play away games at the MCG and away games at Etihad. That's not really an away game. I mean, sure, it's not their stadium, but, it's not really an away game. But look, I think that's it for the Villains and Champions. So, on to the actual review. We're about 30 minutes in, and we're finally going to talk about the game. But it's a game of 2 halves, and I think we can just skip the first half because it's not really worth talking about. We weren't very good, as we talked about already. Bad kicking, turnovers, we were trailing, etc., so forth. But the turnaround after first half into the second half, and especially full time, was phenomenal. The Giants, they lost all of their run. Shield, as you said earlier, Josh, was a non-factor. Cornelio had 4 or 5 possessions after halftime. Cullen Ward had a bit of impact after halftime. He finished, I think, with 29 or 30 possessions, but he was still well held. He only had about, I think, 10 or 11. And Taranto had a pretty solid game throughout. Basically, the difference between...
Rampy absolutely towed up Jeremy Cameron.
Yeah, he did. He did a really good number on him. If you look at some of the stats, the Swans were plus 57 possessions, plus 7 clearances, plus 20 inside 50s, and they were mostly from the last quarter, plus 9 marks inside 50. This is just second half alone, and plus 12 tackles. They dominated them. They had 18 scoring shots to 8, which obviously they kicked more behinds and goals, but they still won by 20 at the end. Guys, hit me with stats.
I didn't know I was supposed to get any. All right. Kieren Jack, 22
Over to you,
disposals.
Steve.
22, Kieren Jack, 22 disposals, 12 contested possessions. Only major issue, disposal efficiency, 46%.
Can't kick the ball.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. He had a couple of really good moments though in that last quarter. I thought his first and last quarters were absolutely phenomenal. Back to his best. He's a bit invisible in the middle quarters though.
But his intensity around the ball was outstanding. I thought he was actually really...
Oh, yeah.
If Hanbury and Jack could learn to kick, we'd almost be unstoppable. But because we've got these 2 players who are so good around the ball, but they can't kick. But you add in Hanbury, Jack, Jones, none of them can really kick the ball well, especially under pressure.
Yeah. Well, there was a stat today on, I think during the Carlton Bulldogs game where they talked about tackle statistics for all players in the league. Matt Priddis is right up there. He had, I think, the most tackles out of like all the players in the last sort of years and stuff like that. But Kieren Jack, he still averages 5 tackles a game.
That's elite.
So when he's up
that's
there...
That's Cyril Rioli level.
Yeah. He's top 20. But like, if they had a look at all the games he's played, all the tackles he's laid over 1,000 tackles in his career.
That's elite. That's amazing. I didn't realise that.
Not quite Jude Bolton, Matt Priddis levels where they're laying like 7-8 tackles a game. But that's the main reason. Like with him in there and he's fit, not only is he a great 2-way runner, but the pressure he actually brings is absolutely phenomenal. And I thought he brought that big time against GWS.
Yep. One thing I noticed. I noticed is that someone's finally paid attention that George Hewitt is an absolute weapon for us, and they worked really hard to take him out of the game, especially in the first quarter. He was almost non-existent on the field. I can't remember who they played on him, but if they had designs to put him on Shield or Coniglio or something like that, it just wasn't happening at all. Shield and Coniglio were having an absolute field day on us. They managed to get him free by the end of the second quarter, and he went to Coniglio, to Shield. And then after half-time, they got Parker to go head-to-head with Shield, and Shield just failed the test. Parker, wore him like a cheap suit. So that was an interesting point for me that someone's finally paid attention to what Hewitt can do for us and tried to take him out of the game.
Well, the thing is, right, he had 5 disposals at half-time with 2 free kicks against, but 3 tackles laid. At three-quarter time, he had 8 disposals. So It really was like that last quarter that he actually finished off with 8 possessions, and he won a lot of ball in that quarter as well. He actually took he finished with 4 hitouts, and he took a few marks as well. Finished with a mark and some other nice stats. But yeah, they really did a number on him. They did their work, they did their homework, and they shut him down.
Yep. Yeah, they did.
Now Franklin, I guess a bit of a divisive Brett Kirk medal winner. Now, his second half was pretty much buddy of old. But, look, I thought Luke Parker should have won it. What do you guys think?
I actually think Lance Franklin was it was a toss-up, because you've got to look at it. Lance Franklin had 540 metres gained. He went at 75% disposal efficiency. He had 14 contested possessions. He kicked 5 goals, 4. That's a pretty good effort.
There's 14 contested. He only had 16 all up. That's
exactly right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, he was really superb, especially in that last quarter. He was literally everywhere. And this time he did call for the ball once, but he actually called for it in a better position than last week when he was calling it from like 80 metres out with about 5 guys right near him. So definitely, I would say this week was definitely better than last week against Melbourne.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
something that
I thought Parker should have got it. I thought Parker.
Yeah,
I was a little bit surprised, and I think if you watch the footage again when they announced that, I think you see a glimpse of Parker's face, and I think he thinks he got dudded, and Josh Kennedy turned around and gave him a hug.
Even Franklin was a bit surprised. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Well, we did chuck out the votes to our listeners, and they did respond in kind. They actually voted 6 ahead of Franklin for Parker. So, out of everyone who voted, Parker was voted the best player on the player ratings. We gave it to Franklin and Parker second, mostly just because Franklin was unstoppable in that last quarter, and really was probably the reason we won that game, because we kicked 11 points.
yeah, we did. We kicked 11 points. Flashbacks to the Essendon game from last year. It was.
Yep. It was one of those games. It's like we're just missing, and it would be like, I'm thinking to myself, right? It'd be so Swans-like for us to just turn the ball over. It goes down the other end, and they kick a goal. And what happened? It did, but the Hindenburg, not related to Himmelberg, intentional alliteration, he hit the post.
He did.
So, yeah. For anyone who listened to the podcast last week, I made a really bad joke, where I said Himmelberg was... it's Himmelberg not related to the Hindenburg, the blimp.
Was that some kind of a hope you crash and burn reference?
No. Just a really bad joke in the moment. Digging myself a hole. Look, third straight win against GWS, which is really good, because GWS had 3 straight against us before we started winning again, so we're ahead 11-4 out of 15. And Franklin has kicked 11 goals in the last 3 wins against the Giants. Isaac Heaney, we said before, laid 10 tackles. Luke Parker was the leading clearance winner on the ground with 9 clearances. I mean, geez, he was pretty much the best player on the ground, arguably. And Josh, you had a really interesting stat about distance gained.
Distance gained. I don't know how I noticed this, but we had 4 players who basically had 2 kilometres gained between them, and that was Luke Parker, Lance Franklin, Jake Lloyd, and Josh Kennedy, which actually surprised me, because the skipper was a little bit quiet in the first half, and then he sort of came out of his shell. But they basically had 500 metres each by the end of the game. It was massive. I expect those numbers from Lloydie and Franklin, but for the other 2, that was a bit of a shock for me.
Yeah, and Stephen, what did you think as well?
Well, you're actually forgetting someone there, Josh. Kieren Jacks had 479 metres gained as well.
Well, then it's 2.5 kilometres.
Yeah, so you've got Franklin 540, Parker 510, Jack 479, Kennedy 440, McVeigh 427. That is huge numbers.
What about
from 6 players?
What about Lloydie as well?
Lloyd was at 401. He was actually a 7th ranked player on metres gained.
Where did Newman go? Because Newman was over 400, wasn't he?
Newman was 369.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't get metres gained when you start chipping it backwards.
Yeah, now going down to poor old Robbie Fox. 4 possessions.
Oh God.
3 tackles. 36 metres gained with his possessions.
Yeah.
He looked a bit out of his depth, didn't he?
He did.
It was a weird selection. It was a really weird selection. I thought he was going to play in defence. I don't know what you guys thought, but I was adamant he was going to play in defence, and I thought it was a good move to play him in defence, to play him against some of those quicker players.
I thought we were going to run him as a sort of a marking forward to try and take some heat off Franklin, but I'm not really sure what we tried to play him as in the end. He sort of this weird sort of mix of wing, half forward, sometimes in the forward 50. I'm not really sure what we were trying to achieve with him, just like I'm not sure what we were trying to achieve with Ronk.
He also played Rocket as well, so he was in there to do the backup ruck duties, but I don't think he even got a hit out.
He got three hit outs.
3 hit outs. Yeah, but George Hewitt ended up at 4.
Yeah.
So,
but you've got you got to look at it from the other perspective that Jordan Dawson got, I think it was 9 hit outs last week. So he as the backup ruckman / winger. I honestly don't know what they were doing with Robbie Fox. I really like Robbie Fox, but I just don't know the whole idea behind it. He only played 79 minutes for the game. He had 8 pressure acts, but there was nothing there. 2 kicks, 2 handballs at 75%. So he got 3 out of 4. And I just don't know. I don't know what was the idea behind it.
Yeah, look, when we did the ratings, I had to rate appropriately, and I'm pretty sure I gave him a 3. I don't know, like, you can't really fault him in some of the things because he was played in areas where he probably wasn't going to have much of an impact, but even when he was near the ball, he really wasn't doing much anyway. But look, we won. He did have an important handball about 5 minutes left in the game when we got it forward and eventually got a goal. But other than that, I mean, he was literally not seen at all.
That would be his first big high-pressure game for us, though. Like, I know he was pretty solid for us when we beat Geelong down at Kidinia, but, you know, our guys lifted and Geelong just fell off the planet after three-quarter time. So
yeah, they did.
I don't know. Look, he's a good depth player for us, I think. I think he's generally reliable, but I think he'd like to have that game again.
Yeah, look, I reckon. I think Jordan Dawson was obviously the pick to stay in. Maybe they managed him. Maybe he had an issue and they just weren't going to say what it was. Brett Kirk, he did a pre-match interview, which I chucked up on the blog, that he said that Jordan Dawson was being managed off a 6-day break. So, I mean, there could have been something there.
Yep.
And he just didn't come up from the warm-up and Robbie Fox was the first in. That just might be the case. It might not have been a choice. They might have been forced to make that change.
Looking at it,
it's a bit of a weird one.
Going outside of Robbie Fox, another couple that really concerned me on the weekend was Tom Papley, who just wasn't there. 9 possessions, you know, and basically 3 tackles. He didn't really do much, and he only played 9.
Must-win game, which, if that's what we were doing, that's quite a feat to pull off that win while managing players' game time.
Well, you look at this: Ronk 76 minutes, Fox 79, Jack 83, Hanbury 85, Haywood 86, Hewitt 90. So Hewitt only had 20 minutes on the bench, over 20 minutes on the bench. So Papley 91. It's really interesting.
Yeah. You could also look at Ben Ronk. I mean, he looks like he needs to have a bit of a rest. But he was practically unsighted for 3/4 of the match, I think. I'll just pull him up now because I actually had the possessions open. This is how his game played out, actually. First quarter, he had 1 possession, and he actually had -1 AFL point. He was actually -1, if you could believe it. Then his second quarter, he got 4 possessions in the second quarter with 2 turnovers, and he had 12. At that point, he had 1 mark, he had 1 free against, and he had 1 inside 50 to go with his 2 turnovers and 3 possessions, really. In the third quarter, he was still the bottom-ranked player. He had 1 more possession. These are all uncontested, by the way. But what he did do was he picked up 2 tackles. And now in the last quarter, he definitely went a bit better. He picked up 7, 2 contested, took 2 marks, and a couple other stats. So, yeah, Ben Ronk is another one you can kind of put in that list and go, what kind of happened there?
It's very interesting. But even Heaney, Ronk, Haywood, like, they did their bits when they needed to. like you know they're going to stay there. They might be managed at times.
Yeah.
But Robbie Fox was just an interesting one, and Tom Papley really worried me. Like, was he carrying an injury? Did he get a bad knock early on? I'm not sure. But, you know, you look at the fantasy points. Fox 25, Papley 36, Robinson 37. Then Ronk, Hewitt only got 46 fantasy points.
Yeah,
So,
but he didn't have a good game.
No.
It was really only this last quarter. And look, there are some other players. We always talk about a couple of players each week. So for this episode, we actually have five players to discuss, and then we'll move on to our social media aspect. But our first player, we've talked about him a little bit, Kieren Jacks. So guys, just give us 1-2 sentences on each player. Josh, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on Kieren Jacks' game, where he's at, etc., so forth.
Ripping first and fourth quarter was a real link man for us. Can't kick, but has never been able to.
Yeah, and Stephen.
Terrific game, high intensity, great in and under, needs to learn to kick.
Yeah, I think that's the overriding theme there is he does need to learn to kick. I thought his effort was right up there, probably the best he's played, or maybe for the last 2 seasons, and I thought he was really critical in the last quarter for us getting back in the game. The next player, Isaac Heaney. So he is a bit like good old LRT, Mr. Fix-It. He plays about 5 positions a game, forward, midfield, and our defence. Josh, I'll start you off on Heaney.
I renamed him Isaac McGovern earlier this week in one of our blog posts. His career is going to be even more interesting now that we found out that he can play as a backman at pinch moments. That the last 3 weeks we've played him in some interesting positions, and that's paid off for us as well. 2 weeks he took game-saving marks, just amazing. Look, he probably should have had a goal by the end of it. That would be a shot that he would normally get, but he didn't touch the ball that many times. He got a couple of critical fists in during the last quarter, but his 10 tackles were just sensational.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And Stephen?
Love the kid, love the endeavour. Had a shocker next.
I don't know about if he had a shocker. He had 10 contested from 13 and 10 tackles. My favourite moment of the match, apart from when he took that mark, I think it was in the second quarter on the wing, was when he got a spoil in on, I think it was Tomlinson when he was on that long lead. And as I said earlier, there was about 11 minutes left in the match. And if he got that mark, it would have been an inside 50 and there was every chance that they would have scored. So I thought like that moment. It reminded me a bit of, I don't know if you guys remember the Andre Everett kind of mark and goal against Geelong. And then that same match, the Heath Grundy little sort of snatch with his hand. I think it was Bartel or someone was running past Grundy and he just stuck out his mitt and picked his pocket.
No,
don't remember.
No, look, that kind of reminded me of that moment. So, look, it was a really good one. Now, Luke Parker. We haven't talked about him, I guess, too much this year. But thoughts, guys? Stephen, I'll start with you.
Outstanding is all I can say. The amount of work and effort that man put in for that game was just brilliant. 33 possessions, 21 kicks, 64% disposal efficiency, 15 contested possessions. Unbelievable. Outstanding performance for 4 quarters.
Josh?
Dylan Shields' daddy absolutely owned him after half-time.
Yeah, and it was a real 4-quarter effort as well. I really loved what he did.
Great.
I love those centre clearances in the 4th quarter. Just get it, and he's just sprinting. He's hitting the pack at almost 100% by the time he gets the ball. Now, we've talked about this guy quite a lot. I'm going to kick it off. But Callum Sinclair, he's come up against 2 really good ruckmen in the last 2 weeks, Max Gawn and Brodie Grundy. He's been beaten in the headouts, but I think apart from Brodie Grundy, Brodie Grundy was arguably best on ground in that 2-point loss that they had. But I thought he did really good against Max Gawn last week. He evened him up, he ran the ground, and this week I thought he just absolutely dominated a lob. He's not a big possession getter, but he's really efficient and he's really effective when he gets it, and he gets clearances and he gets tackles and he gets pressure acts, and he had a lot of meters gained as well. But I was really impressed by how much he actually ran around as well. So, Stephen, thoughts on Callum Sinclair?
Doing a great job. Excuse me, little little concerned about his disposal efficiency this week. Other than that, outstanding.
You need a glass of water, mate.
I think so. I just had some. Yeah, so I'll start that again.
Try. You need a swallow before you talk. Josh, make sure you swallow before you talk, mate.
The big chief, I think he lost hit-outs in the end, but whatever he doesn't give us in hit-outs, he gives us around the ground. There were patches in, I think it was the third quarter, he absolutely schooled Lob. And Lob's not a spud. Lob's a ruckman who occasionally is a spud, but, generally he's pretty good for them. I was happy with Cal. I would have liked a little bit more out of him. But I'll tell you what, there's not too many people who can say they stopped a goal with their head.
Yes, absolutely. And look, that video is up on Facebook as well, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So that is up there if you want to have a look. It is a good old beak stopper, that one. He had no idea it was coming. Now, the last one, we kind of talked about him a little bit, but it's Ben Ronk. So, Josh, I'll get you to kick off Ben Ronk, please.
Well, I'm not really sure what we're trying to do with him at the moment. He was amazing against Hawthorn as this precious small forward, and even though he's a medium size, but we sort of haven't really played him in that role again. I don't understand why. We seem to be trying to use him as some kind of inside mid / wingman. I just prefer to stick him up front. He's got really good goal sense. I don't know what we're trying to do with him at the moment. He needs a rest. I think he needs a rest.
Yeah, his goal sense is a bit freakish, that's for sure. Stephen?
Yeah, I agree with you, Josh. I think he needs the rest, but I think they're actually trying to put him in the midfield because he actually has really quick speed. He's really, really quick off the mark. If you actually watch him, when he takes off that first 5 to 10 metres, no one can catch him. He's not so quick after that, but that really flash hit he gives is quite good in the midfield. I think that's what they're trying to do, but I don't think it's working just yet.
No, I'd prefer to play him as a forward.
Yeah. Yeah, look, his best game's obviously been as a forward. I did have a look at the stats a little while ago when we played Hawthorn. The top speed of that game was 36.5 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
And that was achieved by our man, Ben Ronk.
He's got two games this year when he's kicked 7 goals and 5 goals. If you put him up the front, it demands a response for them. And if he's not kicking goals, he should be creating space for us, though. I just don't understand why we're trying to play him further up the ground.
I think they're trying to play him as maybe a tagger or something like that. That's all I can think of. I don't think he's got the fitness for it. But one of the really interesting things is the fact that if you actually have a look at the average moving speed for the game, Zach Langdon was 9.4 kilometres an hour. Lockie Whitfield was 9.3, but then you're not going to believe who, after obviously Dan Hanbury, who was at 9.2, and he's known to be a very quick mover across the field. The next two were, it was Ben Ronk at 9.1 and George Hewitt at 9.1.
Oh.
And those are players, obviously Ben Ronk, he's very quick, but him and George Hewitt, you wouldn't expect them to obviously have a cruise speed that fast across the field. So I think they're trying to play him as an outside, like a really high forward flank or even like a tagger. I don't think it's worked very well for him because he just doesn't have the tank or the fitness. He can do maybe 1, 2, or 3 bursts in a row, but then he's completely gassed and he needs to.
I wonder if we had a genuine tall forward option at the moment.
All right, so look now onto our questions for our listeners. And look, we put out a question today. The question was, 3 weeks ago, did you think the Swans would have a chance at finishing top 4? Now, obviously, we've discussed this as a group. I think we all agreed that we'd written the Swans off back when we slid from 4th to 9th in one round, and we were as low as 10th at one point. So, yeah, look, the crowd, they got back to us. Jonathan from Twitter, he said, as long as we had Melbourne ahead of us, I knew we were in for a chance. Cheryl from Facebook, yes, always keep the faith in our boys, even when they're down, never give up on them. Peter from Facebook, yes, for sure, the young bloods are getting us through. Andrew from Facebook said, do you think it's in our best interest to finish 5th because the Tigers will be so hard to beat at the MCG? I think on that one, guys, we did beat the Tigers at the MCG last year in a pretty good game. And if we weren't so bad coming out after the bye, we could have actually beaten them at their head as well. Daniel from Twitter, 3 weeks ago, I was calling for a rebuild, so happy we're finals bound again. And Ali from Facebook, yes, I did. I always thought Swans would finish top 4. And Vicky from Facebook, yes, I did. Not only having faith in the boys, but also because the boys put up a fight, seeing them come from behind and take cake. I'm pretty sure I miswrote that. And hit a high no matter how high they fly. Take care. I'm pretty sure it was take care, but might have been take the cake. Questions from our listeners, guys. So I'll get you to answer this one for me, Josh, and then Stephen, I'll get you to answer the next one. Amy from Facebook, she asks for you, Josh, did Robbie Fox do enough to hold his spot? If not, who replaces him?
Nope, and Jordan Dawson.
All right. That's it. Okay.
I don't know what to say.
Fair enough. Now, Stephen, Penny, who also for this one wanted to be known as Monique from Instagram, she asked, are the Swans the form team heading into the finals?
I would actually say no, because the form team you can't go past Richmond. Richmond are the form team. Richmond are the top side. And I would actually say the form team going into the finals will be Geelong. And that's only because they've had an easy run in the last couple of weeks, but I think that's who it'll be.
Yep. Yeah, they always tend to get the soft draw, don't they? Now, guys, I'll get Josh to answer this one first and Steve to come in at the end. But Kay from Facebook, she asks, did Buddy come off injured in the last few minutes of the game? Josh, did you see this?
I did, and I couldn't tell whether he was... Look, I mean, we always pull Franklin in the last 2 or 3 minutes if a win's a certainty anyway. So I didn't think anything unusual at the time, but he did... I wasn't sure if he was having a scratch down there or he was actually sort of rubbing his groin, so I'm not sure. But given the injuries he has played with that we know about, I expect he's going to be there next week.
Yep, and Stephen?
Yeah, I saw it, and I saw him talking to the physio and pointing at his groin and rubbing it a bit. I would actually say it's nothing to worry about, though, because he came out, he was walking around after the game, and I don't think there was much happening, and he was really happy in the post-match interview, so I don't think it's a concern.
Yeah, I'd agree with you guys as well. He kicked the goal. It looked like he kind of might have just, I guess, overstretched a little bit in that contest before he got the 50-metre penalty. And he stayed on the ground. He only came off with about 30 seconds left to go, so it wasn't like he came straight off. He was on there for another couple of minutes anyway. But yeah, I don't think it's anything to worry about. Guys, that's it for tonight's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure having you both on again.
Too easy? I got to say, this bottle of red wine is increasingly getting empty as this podcast goes on.
And Steve, I hope you've been knocking back the beers as a temporary bachelor.
Oh, yes, Justin, the temporary bachelor has drank 1.5 litres of water while we've been on the podcast, so I've done really, really well.
Soft.
That wouldn't happen to have a bit of gin or vodka in it.
No, sadly it doesn't, because I've got to write reports.
No, not much of a... That's all right. You can always write a report semi-drunk. There's nothing wrong with that. You get an A, asshole. As always, guys, we are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the tag The Swans Blog, and you can always get in contact with us during the week using the hashtags SwansCast and SwansCast Extra. Until Thursday night, when before we play the Hawks, that is, for our top 4 chance, go Swans.
Go Swannies, and Justin, just before we wrap it up, just got to send out a message to my old mate Ellie. Talk to you soon, Ellie. Have a great one. Go the Swannies. We'll get some strong players. Yeah, not some lazy players. Don't you worry, Ellie.